They told me the delay was a formality. That was the word the Kelvath 9 Transit Authority used when they announced it over the civilian PA at 0540 that morning. Formality. A Vethaal Cooperative Biosphere Compliance Unit had docked overnight and required access to the civilian transit holding area for a routine fauna audit before outbound connections could resume. Everyone was asked to remain seated. Everyone was asked not to approach the audit personnel. Everyone was asked to have travel documentation and any companion animals accessible and ready for scanning. I had my travel documentation. I had Sable. Sable is 11 years old and has never, in 11 years, been accessible and ready for anything. She was in the soft-sided carrier I'd been hauling since Procurement Bay 7, and she was asleep on the fleece liner I'd cut from an old sweater, and she was generating a sound in the back of her throat that I can only describe as the noise a very small diesel engine makes when it's completely satisfied with the world. She weighed 4.3 kilograms. She had one torn ear from a disagreement she'd had with a door hinge in my old apartment 12 years ago. She was gray, mostly, with a white patch on her sternum that she regarded as a personal vanity and kept very clean. I put the carrier on my knee and waited. The compliance unit came through the civilian wing in a line of 4, a lead specialist in the green-banded audit sash, 2 junior technicians carrying the instrument housings, and what I later learned was a biometric cartographer, a specialist in mapping unknown biological signatures to existing cooperative classification categories. They were Vethaal strain, pale gray skin, the secondary hand set folded flat against their torsos, the way Vethaal do when they want to project calm. The instruments they carried looked like they cost more than my apartment building had. They were fast. I watched them work their way through the holding area with the quiet efficiency of people who have done this thousands of times. There was a couple from the Orient Transit Corridor with a pair of working dogs. Belgian Malinois, travel harnesses, the kind of dogs that look like they'd been manufactured rather than born. The compliance team scanned them, consulted the instrument, cross-referenced the database on the cartographer's handheld, and filed the entry in under 3 minutes. Category confirmed. Biometric signature matched. Logged. There was a livestock broker 2 rows up with a draft horse in a wide cargo bay on a temporary permit. A Percheron, gray, standing at 16 hands, regarding the audit team with the mild contempt of an animal that had been stared at by strangers her entire life. The compliance team spent about 5 minutes on her. The lead specialist's secondary hands shifted once, briefly, then resettled. The cartographer's stylus moved, filed, logged. There were herd dogs, a pair of beagles on leashes, a retriever puppy in a crate that had been crying for 2 hours and had finally given up. All filed, all logged. The instruments gave their confirmations and the team moved on without breaking stride, without conferring, without any of the quiet hesitations I'd seen from other cooperative officials in the presence of Earth's working animals. These were professionals. They had a complete manifest. They had seen everything before. They got to me at 0713. The lead specialist held out the scan wand with the practiced ease of someone who had done it 50,000 times. I unzipped the top panel of the carrier so Sable was accessible. Sable opened one eye, confirmed the world had not improved, and closed it again. The wand passed over the carrier. The instrument was silent for a moment longer than it had been with the dogs. The lead specialist looked at the readout. He looked at it for what I would estimate was 4 seconds longer than he'd looked at any other readout that morning. Then he looked at the carrier. Then he looked at the readout again. "This is a domestic companion animal," he said. He wasn't asking me. He was saying it to the readout, which was not agreeing with him. "That's Sable," I said. "She's 11. She has a veterinary certificate in the outer pocket if you need it." The lead specialist did not respond to this. He passed the wand over the carrier a second time. Then he stepped back and said something to the cartographer in low Vethaal that I didn't catch, and the cartographer came forward with the large handheld unit and ran her own scan. She looked at her readout. She looked at the carrier. She looked at her readout. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "Please remain patient," said the lead specialist, which was not an answer to my question. The junior technicians exchanged what I can only describe as a look. The kind of look that travels sideways between two people who are both thinking the same thing, and neither of them wants to be the first to say it out loud. Then one of them opened the secondary instrument housing and removed a unit I hadn't seen them use on anything else that morning. It was larger. It had a longer scan array. It was the kind of instrument you bring out when the first instrument is wrong. It was not wrong. Sable woke up during the third scan, looked at the lead specialist with the specific expression she reserves for things she finds profoundly uninteresting, and then began washing her right paw. The cartographer's secondary hands unfolded. Not all the way, just the first joint. The way Vethaal's secondary hands emerge when a reflex fires before the conscious mind catches up to it. She looked down at them, the way you'd look at a hand that had moved without you asking it to. She folded them back in. She looked at the lead specialist. "I don't have a category," she said, also in Vetagory. And this time I caught it because my translation chip was running, and she'd stopped keeping her voice low. "Run it again," said the lead specialist. She ran it again. Sable finished washing her paw and tucked her chin back onto the fleece liner. They called the senior analyst down from Deck 4 at 0741. I know the time because I had a connection to catch at 0900, and I was watching the clock with the focused attention of a person who has not had coffee and is doing the math on whether she's going to make it. The senior analyst arrived with the unhurried bearing of a man who expects to spend 30 seconds resolving a junior error. He looked at the readout the cartographer held out to him. He stood there. He looked at it for a long time. He looked at Sable. Sable looked back at him, the way cats look at things, without urgency, without threat, without anything you could file under a category. Just the slow, steady gaze of an animal that has never once in its life been in a hurry and sees no reason to start. The senior analyst looked at the readout again. "Close the session," he said. "Exempt this entry." "Under what classification?" asked the cartographer. A pause. "Prior designation," he said. The cartographer's stylus moved. Somewhere in the Vethaal Cooperative's vast, meticulous, 17th-century-old catalog of known life forms, Sable was logged as the 14th being in recorded history to exist outside any available classification tier. I did not know this at the time. I found out later, from a transit official who thought I deserved an explanation for the 2-hour delay. At the time, all I knew was that the lead specialist re-zipped my carrier panel, told me I was free to proceed, and stepped back with the careful neutrality of a man putting space between himself and something he had decided to stop thinking about. I picked up the carrier. I picked up my bag. I thanked them and went to find my gate. Sable slept through the connection, and the transfer corridor, and the long boarding queue, and the first 4 hours of the outbound run. She woke up when the meal service started, and meowed once at the attendant, in a tone that suggested the portions were inadequate. The attendant, a young Vethaal woman with no secondary hand reflex and no reason whatsoever to know what 14 meant, scratched Sable between the ears through the carrier mesh and called her a beautiful girl. Sable purred. Sable is always right about people,